Why is working from home turning into video conferencing hell?
And what are the best games to play online with friends during the coronavirus lockdown?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. Welcome to Vertical Hold, Behind the Tech News, the podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading technology journalists to get the stories behind the news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined, as always, by Alex Kidman, a man who was shunning the world long before it was cool and socially acceptable. Alex, what's your coronavirus lockdown health and safety tip for the week?
Look, it turns out that sand is a terrible substitute for flour in your sourdough starter, but on the plus side, I do now have more silicon in me than in my laptop.
Well, that's probably going to come in handy sometime very soon. This week, we're also joined by the power couple of Australian technology journalism who are bunkered down at home to ride out the coronavirus lockdown. First up, we have Tegan Jones, Gizmodo editor, high priestess of tech, and coronavirus lockdown master chef contender. Tegan, welcome back to the show. What's been your greatest lockdown kitchen achievement to date?
Hi, thanks for having me. Well, I guess I get to be one of those really smarmy people. Who's like, I was making sourdough before it was cool in Corona. So I actually have a 27-year-old sourdough starter, and I was learning to make it over Christmas. And so I've mostly been doing a lot of that. And I also started fermenting veg and stuff like that, especially because it's so expensive now, even if you can get to the shop. So I've been doing lots of kimchi and sauerkraut and carrot kraut.
I think between you and Matthew Wu, you're just putting the rest of us to shame. You really are.
Good.
What Tegan isn't saying is she's actually making prison wine. It's just code.
Oh, would you believe I just bought a fermenting book that actually teaches you how to make wine from stone fruit in about a week? So you laugh, but I'm really
yes, I would
just
believe that.
I
Oh,
may be
that'll be
I'm one more day away of being in isolation from just starting to like make my own bathtub alcohol.
that'll be a good brew. That'll be a good batch. It was a very good week, you know. And because you can never have too many people called Alex on your podcast, we're
True.
also joined by Alex Walker, Kotaku editor, who is faced with the unenviable task of deciding exactly which post-apocalyptic dystopian game is currently playing out in real life. Alex, welcome back to the show. What game would you say best sums up our current predicament?
Thanks so much for having me on. I was thinking too, I love the classic sort of pandemic board game or app or whatever you're playing it on these days because it has that sort of simulation of just the virus spreading, which kind of really mimics like, oh, I'm just gonna get on a plane and go to Aspen or go to a coronavirus party where we'll all catch it, and then that'll be fine, right? Nothing bad will come out of that.
Every time I go down the street, I think of the opening scenes from Shaun of the Dead when the two of them were walking through the street at night and there's a zombie in the distance going, "Ugh," and then they're doing the dance number.
I think maybe something that kind of mirrors though, like the lockdown that we're in, is probably the original Deus Ex, um,
Mm.
because I remember it was one of the stories that came out when they were writing it. They had to deal with like memory limitations because they were loading the whole map into memory at the time, and it was so large because that was like not something that was done for 2000. So they kind of invented the plague as a way to have an excuse to keep all the NPCs off the streets because the game couldn't handle rendering them and having them walk around. And it's kind of just like today, we're all off the streets and just staying at home inside, trying to avoid the virus.
I will say it's a good time for a new Resident Evil game to be coming out.
Oh God, yeah.
This week, we're going to dive into the best games to play online with family and friends to keep you sane during the lockdown. But first, the dream of escaping the office to work from home. I mean, that's something that Alex Kidman and I have been doing for a long time, but it's kind of new for most people. But it's turning into a nightmare as bosses latch onto the idea of virtual meetings with a little too much enthusiasm. Alex and Tegan, you're now working from home. You're getting dragged into the mass Zoom video calls. How are you faring?
Look, we are. I would say that in terms of like our workplace, we have our daily editorial meeting, and I for one have been really enjoying it actually because it's been going well. Like we haven't had too many mishaps, and it's nice to see everyone. But I would say that I'm getting dragged into probably a few too many superfluous. I would say product briefings from
Oh,
various customers,
yeah.
which is good. Look, things are still launching and you have to do it, but I have had a few which probably weren't entirely necessary. But also I do understand that it's a tough position, and sometimes it's actually been kind of nice just to hear people again, especially if we're kind of having a chat on the side. And don't tell me other people don't chat on the side when they're in video briefings. Don't lie. So
No, you're
that's
the
been kind
only
of a
one. Those other chats, they mean nothing to me.
You'll notice that I'm remaining completely quiet throughout this. I would never do that kind of thing. It just
but
wouldn't
so
happen.
exactly. So you know what? There sometimes is too many, but the upside is it is kind of just nice to see other humans because Alex and I are literally 13 days into our own self quarantine at the moment. We can go outside tomorrow, but sometimes it's fun to see people again.
I think that's the other one as well that's started to pop up a lot, particularly within gaming, is private live streams or private. I did one the other day, which was kind of like a cross between uh, joining a private Discord server, then having a private voice chat, then having a private presentation, which was done through a shared screen, and then the live stream. And that went on for like almost 2 hours. And everyone, everyone was talking on the side to the point where I think after about 90 minutes, it wasn't even on the side. It was just openly in the Discord chat while it was going on because everyone was
Yeah.
passing out. I think what's coming up a lot with working from home is that when you used to work in an office, like people were quite good about being structured with when they were going to require the time of others. But now that everybody is working from home, it's just kind of an instantaneous thing. Like you need them, so they hit you up, and it's
Yeah.
kind of I'm in a call or like this other thing is going on, and it's kind of you have that collision of everything landing at once, and nobody has sort of gotten into a workflow to sort that out
I think
properly
that's very
yet.
true. Definitely. I think that some of the briefings that I've been called to are coming in a lot later than they would have in the past when it was, you'd have to physically go somewhere, whether it was, an office or a restaurant or whatever it happens to be. And I suppose that would be because there's less organization involved if you don't have to, book a place and things like that.
I was going to say it does make like international talent a little bit easier to access in the sense that they're accustomed to doing it remotely anyway, and now it's
Mm.
kind of the only they can't do those large international in-press briefings. By the way, nobody was having as many in-person briefings or flying people overseas anywhere near as much as they have claimed over the last 2 weeks. That is kind of like the almost like the stay safe at the end of the email signature kind of crutch, but that's how people are starting a lot of these meetings. They'll be like, "Oh, we would have loved to see you. We had this really big thing planned." No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't. Just stop.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of planning, it's interesting because having worked from home for a number of years for a company which really is spread across the globe, I've sort of gotten used to this idea of you really have to book meetings. And I think, as you said, Alex, it comes down to that thing of etiquette, maybe even a new meeting etiquette, because your classic office meeting was often this thing of, oh, well, we'd better have half an hour to an hour because people will turn up late and people will have coffee and people are doing this and that. And it takes a lot of time. Whereas a lot of these video meetings, you really can blast through everything that you need in 5 minutes and actually really super, super efficient. But things are not always efficient when you're video conferencing, are they, Tegan?
No, no, definitely not. Like, I think that it's really easy for a lot of it just to go over without realizing it. And I really think that my advice would be if you are holding these sort of meetings is to try and like cut it at 30 if you can, unless you have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Because I think you just lose the audience, especially if it's a larger group. I would say the other thing too that I found really, honestly, very disappointing amongst the adults in the industry is that I've noticed that in some of the briefings that I've been in, uh, people are far more likely to be purposely rude, like especially in the chat, not so much on voice, but in the chat that's happening during a presentation. And it's just not necessary. Like I know that as journalists, we always might be a little bit on the cynical side. We don't always buy into the hype of a product, but that's no reason to turn into absolute like keyboard warriors that just are really really rude just because they're behind a screen. So it's been really disappointing to see the uptick of that in some briefings.
Now, Tegan, we also have a new Olympic sport, Zoom bombing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Zoom bombing is essentially where you get an unwanted person drop into your video chat. It can be funny. For example, Hamish Blake, the Australian comedian, has been doing a call out to be low key invited to different Zoom meetings, so no one else knows except for whoever sent him the link. And I think he even ended up in an Air Force
Yes.
um, meeting in one of their log meetings. So I mean that's kind of funny, but the bad side of it is that it has resulted in, because it's so easy to screen share on Zoom, trolls jumping in and sharing screen with pornography or just generally being pests. So that hasn't been particularly helpful. So I did write something the other day about tips to make sure that doesn't happen to you.
It's not that
How do
difficult
you
to lock
avoid
it
it?
down,
Oh
really.
no, it's really not. And look, from what I could find, the main culprit is people just posting the link to their Zoom meetings publicly, on Twitter and things, even if it's not for
Shit,
like
that'll do it.
so many. Like I went and checked like the hashtag or even just people putting like Zoom meeting, and there were so many in there. Like I kind of get it if you're doing a very open webinar that's for the public. I get that. It is really hard to get around that. But if it's like a meeting for your company or if it's for school kids or something, please don't post it on Twitter. There are other very, very private ways that you can share that information around. So don't do
Mummy, why
that.
is that man holding a cucumber?
Pretty much. And it's very easy to pass. I think even by default in the settings, it sets it that if you're setting up a meeting, that it'll be passworded. So there's just a lot of things you can do to avoid that.
Yeah. So Zoom has really taken off. Alex, what kind of numbers have they been seeing?
So yeah, look, they've Zoom's been around a while. I mean, back in December they were saying they had about 10 million daily users. Now they have 200 million, although that's not automatically going to be revenue because an awful lot of those are going to be people using the free version 40-minute limited because it's actually surprisingly generous in terms of what it gives you for nothing.
Yeah.
But I think Zoom is kind of feeling the strain in terms of giving that much away to that many people for nothing.
And of course, Mr. Walker, they've also, when you get that kind of attention, people start to pick apart your security problems, don't they? They've had problems with people looking at their end to end encryption. What other things have people been saying about Zoom that may not be so complimentary?
Well, there were problems with Zoom last year. If you remember, they had a very massive 0-day security problem, which was kind of the level that forced like Apple to issue a very quick update to correct it. Zoom has never been an especially secure piece of software. I mean, SpaceX has just banned all of its employees from using it because of the problems that are coming up with how much it really leaks like a sieve. There was the other problem that popped up where if you're having a private chat with someone in Zoom when the meeting is over, that private chat will be accessible because it'll just be publicly available through the log. So it's no longer private, which is, you know,
Ooh,
excellent, but great
yeah,
piece of design.
yeah,
I personally, I hate Zoom. We were using it at work last year for like some teleconferencing with a team in Melbourne, and I hated using it then. And just that's kind of the problem now is just that it was never designed to be really as secure as it should be from the start, and it is only going to continue to get worse. There was the disclosure problem that came up between two Googlers, for instance, because Google has quite a strict 90-day policy when it comes to 0-day security flaws. So a company can have time to sort it out, fix everything, and patch everything before the whole world discovers. And
yeah,
they decided to basically, well, one Googler went against that policy and just announced it now for the very obvious logic that the problem isn't in 90 days. The problem is that people are installing Zoom today or have
yeah.
already installed it over the last 2 or 3 weeks. So they need people to be aware of like what can happen to their data. Alternatively, just don't use it. Don't use it. Terrible program. Plenty of alternatives.
I
Just
think part of the problem there, though, and you're not wrong, there are tons of alternatives, and there are tons of alternatives that have much, much better security, but the ones that are more kind of your enterprise grade security are a lot more complex to use. And you do hit that problem between employees who are having to use it for the first time because they've had to use it before, and then a more complex package, like, for example, Microsoft Teams, which can do a heck of a lot more in a slightly more secure wrapper,
Oh,
but which is really quite painful to use if you don't know your way
Teams
around it.
is the 11th plague of Egypt. Teams is the worst. Oh,
Teams has
give me
gotten a lot
frogs.
better.
Give me boils. Oh.
There goes our Microsoft
I mean,
sponsorship opportunities forever.
I mean, we had fires, floods, and baboons, so like we're not
Yeah.
too far off that here in
Yeah.
Sydney.
No, but I mean, like even something like Skype has got like an option now where you can create basically like a pre-conference call, and then people can join that without needing an account, which is
I
nice
hate
because
Skype.
Okay.
I'm going to put that out there. That's my hot take. Like, no, I can't swear, can I?
All right.
Darn
Cross them off the
Skype.
sponsorship list as well. Yeah.
It's Microsoft again. We're just sorry, Microsoft.
No, you know what? I
I
would be
still
open
like
to
it.
being convinced. I'd be open to be convinced, but
Hmm.
Skype just reminds me of like 7 years ago and just being like a bit dodgy. Like, prove me wrong. Please, prove
Oh,
me wrong.
I don't
We
think. To
used
be
it for
fair, I don't
recording
think
the
I can.
podcast. Yeah.
I'd say Google Hangouts has come out of this pretty well, like especially because it is quite simple to, and you almost have like that functionality you do with like a streaming software like Open Broadcaster Studio or XSplit, where you can either stream a window or you can stream like an entire display, so a whole screen. And I think that especially for a lot of people that just need to jump in or jump out, like it's quite good to say, oh, I just want to quickly show you this bit of a presentation, show it, stop. That works well on Macs, it works well on PCs, and it does so without fuss. There's no, like, it's quite clearly labeled, so
Well,
that's
I
easy
mean,
for a lot of people.
that's all well and good, but can it allow you to set Age of Empires as your virtual background, or can you do what the TikTok kids are doing on that and teach people how to record yourself like you're paying attention and setting that as your background, like you are in Zoom, and then you just walk away and get a snack while your boss is talking?
And you're going,
Unfortunately, no.
Yep.
It's so funny. It's actually excellent.
And now you've told all the people, none of us can get away with this ever again, Tegan.
Thanks a lot.
I am the cops of virtual
Ruin it for
conferencing.
everyone. Yeah.
But I look, I know what you mean. I'm doing a university degree, which I've been doing via Zoom for some time now. And the other day, I threw up Mount Fuji as my background because I'm learning Japanese, and it startled my lecturer, but then made her laugh for a good 3 or 4 minutes. She had to apologise to the rest of the class, and so did I, because it was kind of disruptive, but not in an intentional way. It was just I'm feeling a bit down. I'll do something fun.
It's good
I
to have
can't
some
hear you. The
fun.
bullet train's passing.
Exactly.
Going through the tunnel.
I mean, I think it does bring a little bit of lighthearted fun to some of these meetings. Like even just yesterday, I was in a Samsung briefing and I just put Bally as my background because he looked like it was sinister and coming right for me. And like I was getting like everyone's having a laugh, everyone's having some fun.
My favorite story was the university lecturer who had to stop the class because she interrupted a couple of students enjoying themselves, shall we say?
Yes,
And the whole
Yes.
thing was
It's a family
recorded.
podcast,
So
but I think we know what you mean.
yeah,
they were having loving times. That's all, as adult times.
They were very good friends.
They're very good friends.
So, Mr. Walker, I think one of the other big winners here, and you mentioned it before, is Discord. Now, talk us through what Discord is.
So, if you can imagine IRC that also has channels that are exclusively for voice chat, then you've got a pretty good idea of what Discord is. It's become basically the de facto choice of communication for the entire gaming industry, partially because it's very easy for developers to spin up their own channels. It's quite easy to moderate, and it's got video chat support now as well. So, like their paid version is Nitro, but even without that, you can support streaming a video to 50 participants. And before it was 10, so that was kind of enough.
I think what Alex is also not telling anyone is that it's also very easy on Discord to have your identity low-key stolen. Alex, you want to tell that story?
Yeah. So this was going a couple of years ago, but I woke up one morning and there was just somebody sent me a message saying, "Hey, this person is going around saying that they're Alex Walker and they're trying to do an interview for something, but what they're actually trying to do is steal what they call server tokens, which are effectively like sort of the skeleton key for a Discord server." And that was kind of a very weird day. And I wrote about it because I didn't want to sort of go through the whole loyally route. So I just got in touch with, and it was just like a 16-year-old kid at the time, to talk him down off the edge and also just avoid something that got ugly and sort of drawn out. Because a lot of the times the people that mess around with things and try and do a lot of exploits that our kids are just doing it because nobody says anything to them. It's just a
Mm.
case of you open all the doors that you can find. So that I mean that, but that was I wouldn't pin that on Discord so much as
No,
just
it's a good story that was attached
yeah,
to Discord. I think about how that was happening and then how you ended up using Discord to then talk to your impersonator. It made for a
yeah,
really great story.
yeah. It is one of those kind of like sort of Rubicon moments, especially because I remember like waking up and it was the first thing I saw upon like waking up. It's kind of identity theft. I think I'm fortunate enough to not have any sort of serious consequences because something like that, like if anyone was more malicious, especially if you're talking about reputations and things, like that can
Yeah.
get really hairy. So I think I was quite lucky in that regard. But your original question was Discord generally.
Gamers also use it as like a side channel when they're playing games. So you might be playing a game online against each other, but you're talking to each other and interacting with each other through Discord on the side. Yes.
Actually,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
we had. Oh, can I take this one, Alex?
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do this quite a bit, almost every night, really, when we're playing Overwatch. But I think one of the best stories we have when we're doing exactly that, we had a bunch of us in Discord, about 6 or 8 of us, who were all playing Player Unknown's Battleground, so PUBG. And, you can only have 3 people on a team at once, so we split up, that's fine. Very rare to get thrown into the same server. And we realized as we were talking to our teammates, but still all in the same channel, that we were recognizing really specific things that each other were saying about like the surroundings and who they were going after and the color of that house. And we realized about 15 minutes in that not only had we all gotten chucked in the same server, we were actually fighting each other at that exact moment. It was very, very funny. And then we certainly didn't all just team up, which is illegal in that game, and then try and win. That definitely did not happen, officer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. did not.
Everyone worked it out after I died, so I had to be the
It
one
was
that sat
great.
on the sidelines through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
There often
But-
has to be a sacrificial Alex, I find. It's
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But no, you're right. It actually is so good for that. Like just having a chat, whether you're on the same team or not, it's so stable and such an easy means of communication because you can run it through your browser if you don't really want to download the actual software. It's just very simple.
Yeah, and it just like
My-
splits the left side into a series of text channels and voice channels, and one
Yeah.
click in or out will take you out. But you can also do things like filter in RSS feeds, automated messages, so you can get a very similar Slack workflow going through Discord as well. So it is actually quite a powerful piece of software.
My son's been setting up a Discord server basically for his entire high school, as far as I can tell, and just fleshing out. And they've got the teachers involved and everything and sharing messages. And he's also got other Discord servers going with his friends. And it's funny because he's in year 11. So last year he did year 10 work experience at a programming studio. And he'd never heard of Slack. And they sat down and they showed him this thing. And he said, so it's like Discord, but for work. And of course, all the people who worked there were gamers. And they're like, yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it is. And he
Yeah.
knew he found his people because at lunchtime they'd sit down and play Magic the Gathering. So he definitely found his people.
Definitely.
That's probably a good segue actually into the other story we wanted to get into, or the other thing we wanted to discuss, because it seems pointless to have the editor of Kotaku and the editor of Gizmodo and not talk gaming and what's actually happening in gaming at the moment.
Notice how they already managed to talk about gaming before we got here,
We
though.
can't
help
Let's not
ourselves.
say
That
there
was
was no
subtle.
talk of gaming.
It's how
we
That was
said.
subtle.
It's how
They slipped it in and thought no one would notice.
Smooth. That almost nobody had noticed. But one of the things that strikes me, and Mr. Walker, I wonder if you've got some thoughts on this, is we've seen that huge push towards digital platforms and digital distribution. Obviously, none of us can actually get out to the shops anymore, or shouldn't be. What are the Australian games retailers doing? What's happening down at a JB Hi-Fi or an EB Games at the moment?
Well, the simple one is they're making an absolute killing. Like I'm not even joking. Like JB, EB, even ones like Target or the stores that are Target are still around. Big W as well because they still have trade with video games. They're absolutely cleaning up. It was part of the reason why there was a little bit of delay from that sort of sector of retailer and sort of responding to like what's going to happen with different places shutting down and what's our policies going to be because they had such an uptick in trade. And it's not just them either, your online retailers. So if you think like your PC case gear, PLE computers, your M waves, your Scort Teps, the ones that sell a lot of monitors, office equipment around a PC, special PCs, GPUs. They're also making a killing. But what's really sort of changed in the last couple of weeks for JB and EB specifically, and not so much Big W, is it was going to be a big couple of weeks for gaming anyway. You had on the 20th was Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing, both on the same day. So they're big releases anyway. And so people were going to flock there and get them as quickly as they could. On the sort of retailer side, there was Half Life Alex, so the first Half Life game in like a literal age. So that was a big one for VR. And then you also had recently a whole bunch of games breaking street date, which meant that you could get them physically, but you couldn't actually get them digitally until, much later than when they were supposed to come out. So Persona 5 Royal, which is kind of, think of it like a Game of the Year edition of Persona 5, which is like a big sort of high school JRPG that is what's a bit, I guess I could say it's a couple of 100 hours, but probably the best way to explain like how big a game of it was is when they started sending out codes for Persona 5 originally, they sent them out 3 months in advance.
They need to. My eldest son, who's a teenager, he's appropriate for the game, is obsessed with it, and he was quite annoyed because I think it was EB Games started selling it quite early, and he had a pre-order in with Amazon, which actually didn't turn up until the day before on sale
Oh
date.
no.
But the one upside for this was the DLC, as you said, that's digital, and that wouldn't unlock until on sale anyway.
Yeah. I spoke to the publisher or the local distributor a fair bit about Persona 5 situation because I was asking, was there official approval for this? Because there was a whole bunch of games that EB just completely let the floodgates open on. There was a few from Bandai Namco, and from as far as I can tell, there wasn't approval secured beforehand, although they might have just drawn a line under it maybe a day or so afterwards because nobody would get back to me with a statement. But I remember when Persona 5 broke, we actually had ads running on Kotaku at the very day, and they still had the original release date. And when I was writing the story, I actually got a press release from the distributor with a sort of like, that kind of like accolades trailer, like reinforcing the release date, which was still the week after. And even this week, like the biggest one, even bigger than Animal Crossing, was Final Fantasy VII Remake. So Square Enix put out like a note that's saying, and this is, if there are two big games in the year, Animal Crossing isn't one of them. It's Cyberpunk and it's Final Fantasy VII. That's, people are so attached to this franchise. And Square said, look, because of the coronavirus and because of the problems it creates with the general global shipping chain, we're sending it to Europe early and we're sending it to Australia early. So basically, a day after that, people started getting, copies of Final Fantasy VII 9 days before anyone else in the world. And EB were just telling people openly the day after that, yeah, come into the store and we'll just sell it to you. Big Dub tried to do the same thing, but their system wouldn't actually let them do it. And if you had a digital pre-order, you still have to wait until the 10th of April.
I don't know if I'd be brave enough to go into a store to buy software. This is the thing that sort of surprised me. Admittedly, for FF7, I own like 4 or 5 copies of that game across every other platform that's not the remake. So I probably don't need another copy, but let's face it, inevitably I will end up with one.
Well, it's one of the rare games. Remember, like the remake comes on a couple of Blu-rays. It's not just a single Blu-ray. So there's kind of actually a good argument for buying it physically, just because
Especially with
so
the
you don't have
internet
to download
problems
it.
at the moment,
Yeah, definitely.
That's the thing. The other trend that we've kind of seen as well is obviously VR has taken off because people are still looking for ways to stay fit. So Ring Fit Adventure, which even before everything kind of got really real with coronavirus, was a couple of months on back order. It was back ordered to about mid to late April. And if you guys remember, there were some stories about people buying up a lot of them as soon as they would go on sale at eBay and then price gouging on eBay and the like. Now the pre-orders are back to something like July for Ring Fit Adventure, and Beat Saber as well, really hard to find at the moment. So people are really trying to tap into that games for fitness thing at the moment. The other thing that's been cool is that there's a new Humble Bundle out specifically for COVID-19 that has a lot of great stuff in it at the
That
moment.
thing is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
I picked that up and I worked out there's about 12 to 15 games on there I already own, and it was still well worth getting just financially. And that's leaving aside the incredibly admirable um, charitable side of doing that particular bundle as well.
Absolutely. I mean, for a minimum of 51, like obviously, would encourage you if you can afford to donate more. Obviously, do that if you can. But $51 for things like you've got Super Hot and Hollow Knight and Into the Breach and The Witness, and look, there's just so much on there. Like Tropico 4, if you feel like being the dictator of your own island. A bunch of
Sounds
Jackbox
familiar.
stuff in there, right? Like there's so many
Worms,
cool things in there. Yeah, Worms, which I'm
Mm.
always a big fan of. This is some great
Jackbox
stuff in
pack.
there.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, some really great stuff.
So my house, we're a little bit more old school. We've gone out and we've got a couple of consoles lying around. We've gone out and bought Rocket League on the on the PlayStation, so we can play against the neighbors who have it on the Xbox. Um, and the update from the other week where I said one of the neighbors went postal on the Minecraft server. They've locked everything down. We've threatened to tell his mum, which is the nuclear option, and he seems to have fallen into line now and he's behaving himself. So we'll
Thor
see
has
how long
learned his
that.
lesson.
Yes, Thor
Oh
has
god.
learned his lesson. We'll see how long that lasts. But the other thing that I figured out, it's not a new thing, but I hadn't gone looking for it till now, is that a lot of people have a Nintendo Wii, the original Nintendo Wii, and a lot of people have Mario Kart. But Nintendo being Nintendo, like most big companies, switch off features after a while because they want you to buy the new one. So they disabled the option that let you go online and play against other people. But I found a very simple way to override that. And so now we know a whole lot of people with Wii's and Mario Kart, so we can play online against them. And I think there may actually be a Turner Kidman smackdown coming. We're going to line it up, family, and see how we go. But that's great. And I've been contacting all my friends and saying, all right, what devices have you got? What games do you play? And trying to figure out who we can match up with what.
But can I
Yeah.
ask if that was the Google DNS trick that you used for that?
It's not a Google DNS trick, but it is a DNS trick. What you need to do is change the DNS servers on the Wii, and then when you load up the Wii, you go to the what's it called, like the user agreement page,
It's the
because
online service agreement, and you pointed in
yes,
the wrong direction, and it
the
basically.
DNS
Mm.
Oh,
points
that's
it to a different
cool.
page because they didn't use HTTPS for it. So the DNS points you to a different page. That page runs the exploit and then all the online features. And the only thing is, every time you restart the Wii, it's lost. So you need to go through that again. And it takes about 90 seconds. And after that, you can jump in online and play against people around the world, or you can create rooms and codes and play against your friends. So that, I think, for the next weeks, months, or whatever it's going to be, we're going to get a lot of value out of that.
That's so
Oh.
cool because I found that was a fix. I was having problems with Animal Crossing, and I've had the same with Mario Kart on the Switch before. Just I could not connect to servers and whatever. So I just tried putting in Google's primary DNS, so 008 and it fixed it all up. And I wrote a piece about it, and it's just getting insane traffic because so many people have that same issue. Like if it's not a NAT problem, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, it seems to have fixed a lot of people up, which I think is nice because at the moment people are really craving that camaraderie, and this is where games can really step in, so people can still have a connection. I mean, even who has recognized that? With a year and a half to 2 years ago, I saw this great side by side headline where the World Health Organization was going down that path of, gamer syndrome, which I will not get into how wrong that is medically, but now there was a similar headline or a juxtaposed headline from the last week about who was saying how good games are for mental health, especially in the time of people being in isolation. So I really think this is gaming's time to shine, not just to cure boredom, but to really bring people together when they're physically apart.
Yeah, and there's definitely some stats on like what's happening around that. I was in a briefing last week, and a company was saying that they've seen, so they're a hardware company, so they get their analytics and metrics direct from the hardware, and they were seeing hours played rise by 50% worldwide. hours on, I think there was a national ISP of Italy. I remember a quote from a Reuters story how they were blaming Fortnite and online gaming for for more than 2/3 uptick in data usage and network traffic since the coronavirus hit. If you look at something like streaming, so people that are just tuning into stuff like Twitch, Facebook, Mixer, YouTube, Twitch surpassed 3 billion hours watched in a quarter, so average of 1 billion hours a month for the first time in their history. And even while that happened, in the same quarter, you still had over 1.5 billion hours watched across YouTube Gaming Live, Facebook, and Mixer as well. So, we're talking about like 4.5, 4.6 billion hours of those streaming platforms. People are just playing a whole lot more. I mean, I think the one that I really just made me laugh is I have this app that I like to play a lot. It's a digital adaptation of a game made by the person who did Codenames, and it's kind of like Civilization, but a card game version of that. And there was an update posted to the sort of in-game status. And this is not like a Fortnite. This is not a big mobile app. This is just the amount of people that might be playing it regularly. Like last year would be like hundreds, if
Yeah,
that.
it's a real board game nerd made digital type game.
Yeah.
Awesome.
They
Yeah,
had
it's
to
great.
apologize. They had to apologize because they were not prepared for a 500% uptick in users. And
This
it's
was through
just,
the ages, right?
yeah, this is through the ages. And there are a
Lovely
lot
if
of
annoying problem to have.
yeah, but a lot of different games are seeing that, and I think like especially something the big winner out of all of this is probably Xbox Games Pass, because a lot of people it was already having a really good year and a really good sort of 6 to 12 months because of how fleshed out the service had been and how many first party or at least day one exclusives it was getting with um, things like Halo Master Chief Collection dropping on PC and all the rest of it. And now, when people are stuck in a situation where they are actively looking for something to fill the time, and you even start to see across like non-gaming audiences that gravitating specifically towards gaming to find a game to play, it's a really good value proposition. And I think it's just a really killer sort of play that's worked out so well for Microsoft.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Tegan for making time for the show this week.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
And Tegan, I know I've asked you this before, but if folks listening want to find your writing or indeed yourself online, where can they do that?
Sure. So all of my writing is over at gizmodo.com.au. And if you want to stalk me on whatever social media you happen to use, I'm always Tegan_writes, as in writing, and Tegan is TEGAN.
Excellent. All the best people are called Tegan, and all the other best people are called Alex. Also, thanks for making time for the show this week.
Thanks so much for having me on, as always.
And again, I've asked you this before as well, but where do we find you online?
So you can find me at kotaku.com.au. That's KOTAKU. And on Twitter, you'll find me at Dippizuka, which is DIPPIZUKA.
And of course, you can catch up with us on Twitter at VerticalHoldAU or via the Vertical Hold Facebook page.
Also, I feel bad, Adam. You have a very good name as well. Good job on Adam.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've always
Very
been
good
kind
names.
of partial to it myself.
Oh, look, I've tried to get him to change his name to Alex. He says after a few beers, he has said he'll consider it. So I just need to work. I just need to work a little bit harder.
Same amount of letters, it's pretty close.
Yeah, we need to bring up some more Adams through the ranks. We've got to train some up. So actually, we've got something special to throw in for regular listeners this week. Aussie Broadband is our great new sponsor, and they've given us a special promo code which gives new customers a $10 discount for 6 months when signing up online for an unlimited plan. The promo code is VERTICAL. That's vertical. So hopefully that will come in handy for Aussie listeners shopping around for a great broadband service. And as always, thanks everyone for listening. We know things are tough out there, so try and stay home, try and stay safe, and we'll catch up with you again next week. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. So Zoom has really taken off. Alex, what kind of numbers have they been seeing? Sorry, Alex Kidman.
Good question. One I can't
It's in the
answer.
sheet.
Oh,
It's in the sheet.
God.
They
Okay.
were in December. They had 10 million users.
Sorry, I
Now they
didn't
got
have the sheet
200
open. I
million.
had the.
Can I have my answers written for me in the sheet?
It's been a long day.